The Noble Truths aren't philosophy, they're a survival manual. I have heard that on one occasion the Blessed One was staying near Varanasi in the deer park at Upādāna. There he addressed the group of 5 monks. There are these 2 extremes that are not to be indulged in by one who has gone forth. Which 2? That which is devoted to sensual pleasure in connection with sensuality, base, vulgar, common, ignoble, unprofitable, and that which is devoted to self-affliction, painful, ignoble, unprofitable. Avoiding both of these extremes, the middle way realized by the Tathagata, producing vision, producing knowledge, leads to stilling, to direct knowledge, to self-awakening, to unbinding. And what is the middle way realized by the Tathagata that producing vision, producing knowledge, leads to stilling, to direct knowledge, to self-awakening, to unbinding? Precisely this noble eightfold path: right view, right resolve, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. This is the middle way realized by the Tathagata that producing vision, producing knowledge, leads to stilling, to direct knowledge, to self-awakening, to unbinding. Now this, monks, is the noble truth of stress. Birth is stressful, aging is stressful, death is stressful, sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair are stressful. Association with the unbeloved is stressful. Separation from the loved is stressful. Not getting what is wanted is stressful. In short, the 5 clinging aggregates are stressful. And this, monks, is the noble truth of the origination of stress. The craving that makes for further becoming, accompanied by passion and delight, relishing now here and now there, i.e., craving for sensuality, craving for becoming, craving for non-becoming. And this, monks, is the noble truth of the cessation of stress, the remainderless fading and cessation, renunciation, relinquishment, release, and letting go of that very craving. And this, monks, is the noble truth of the way of practice leading to the cessation of stress. Precisely this noble eightfold path: right view, right resolve, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Vision arose, insight arose, discernment arose, knowledge arose, illumination arose within me with regard to things never heard before. This is the noble truth of stress. This noble truth of stress is to be comprehended. This noble truth of stress has been comprehended. Vision arose, insight arose, discernment arose, knowledge arose, illumination arose within me with regard to things never heard before. This is the noble truth of the origination of stress. This noble truth of the origination of stress is to be abandoned. This noble truth of the origination of stress has been abandoned. Vision arose, insight arose, discernment arose, knowledge arose, illumination arose within me with regard to things never heard before. This is the noble truth of the cessation of stress. This noble truth of the cessation of stress is to be realized. This noble truth of the cessation of stress has been realized. Vision arose, insight arose, discernment arose, knowledge arose, illumination arose within me with regard to things never heard before. This is the noble truth of the way of practice leading to the cessation of stress. This noble truth of the way of practice leading to the cessation of stress is to be developed. This noble truth of the way of practice leading to the cessation of stress has been developed. And monks, as long as this, my 3-round 12 permutation knowledge and vision concerning these 4 noble truths as they have come to be, was not pure, I did not claim to have directly awakened to the right self-awakening unexcelled in the cosmos with its devas, maras, and brahmas, in this generation with its contemplatives and brahmans, its royalty and common folk. But as soon as this, my 3-round, 12-permutation knowledge and vision concerning these 4 noble truths as they have come to be, was truly pure, then I did claim to have directly awakened to the right self-awakening unexcelled in the cosmos with its devas, maras, and brahmas, in this generation with its contemplatives and brahmans, its royalty and common folk. Knowledge and vision arose in me. Unprovoked is my release. This is the last birth. There is now no further becoming. That is what the Blessed One said. Gratified, the group of 5 monks delighted in the Blessed One's words. And while this explanation was being given, there arose to Ven, Kondanya, the dustless, stainless Dhamma I. Whatever is subject to origination is all subject to cessation. And when the Blessed One had set the wheel of Dhamma in motion, the earth devas cried out, "Near Varanas." In the deer park at Upādāna, the Blessed One has set in motion the unexcelled wheel of Dhamma that cannot be stopped by contemplative or Brahman, Deva, Mara, or Brahma, or anyone at all in the cosmos. On hearing the earth devas' cry, the devas of the 4 great kings took up the cry. The devas of the 33, the devas of the hours, the contented devas, the devas delighting in creation, the devas, muses, wielding power over the creations of others. The devas of Brahma's retinue took up the cry, "Near Varanas." In the deer park at Upādāna, the Blessed One has set in motion the unexcelled wheel of Dhamma that cannot be stopped by contemplative or Brahman, Deva, Mara, or Brahma, or anyone at all in the cosmos. So in that moment, that instant, the cry shot right up to the Brahma worlds, and this 10,000-fold cosmos shivered and quivered and quaked, while a great measureless radiance appeared in the cosmos, surpassing the effulgence of the deities. Then the Blessed One exclaimed, "So you really know, Kondanya? So you really know?" And that is how Ven, Kondanya, acquired the name Anya Kondanya, Kondanya who knows. The world of the Noble Truths. When I was in school, I was taught that if you wanted to understand somebody's thinking, you had to look for the structure, the underlying framework in which all the points this person was discussing found their meaning, found their place. In the Buddha's teachings, you have 2 structures. One is the 4 Noble Truths, the other is the Noble Eightfold Path, and they contain each other. The 4th Noble Truth is the Noble Eightfold Path. And the first factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, right view, consists of the 4 Noble Truths. This makes the point that the 4 Noble Truths are not just a theory. They are a way of looking at the world, but they play a role in a path of action, determining how you're going to act. For most thinkers, the underlying structures start with first principles and then argue from those first principles to build a structure, like building a building based on a foundation. But the image the Buddha gives is of a path. What ties all his teachings together is not where you're coming from, but where you're going. He teaches that it is possible to put an end to suffering, and everything in his teachings has meaning in the quest to put an end to suffering. He's not just offering 4 interesting facts about suffering. He's saying this is the important issue to focus on. As you focus on this issue, everything else makes sense. Everything else finds its meaning. That's because the truths don't just sit there. They have duties. The truth of suffering. What is suffering? It's clinging to the aggregates. That's to be comprehended. We don't usually comprehend our sufferings in that way. We think, why is this pain afflicting me? Why is this situation in the world outside afflicting me? But the Buddha is saying that suffering is the act of clinging to form, feelings, perceptions, fabrications, or consciousness. It's something we do. It's not something we're just on the receiving end of. We're actively doing the suffering. He then defines the clinging as desire and passion for these things. The word he uses for clinging can also mean feeding. We like to feed on these things. This is where the analysis gets really counterintuitive. We think that feeding is one of our main pleasures of life, but the Buddha is saying that feeding is really suffering. You're dependent on something, you've got a hunger, and it's not yet satisfied. The cause of that suffering, he says again, is desire and passion. But in this case, it's desire and passion that would lead to a state of becoming. This is reflected in the fact that the word for craving that he identifies here can also mean thirst. So you see the basic analogy he's got here. You're thirsting for something, you're hungering for something. That's going to cause you to suffer. As you find what you want to eat, you think you're happy. But he says, actually, the feeding in itself means that we're still feeling a lack, that we're really dependent on something that we're feeding on. That's the suffering. Now, the cessation of suffering would be to put an end to that desire and passion, that craving. He offers the Noble Eightfold Path as the path to follow to reach that end. Now, as I said, each of these truths has a duty. Suffering is to be comprehended. The cause or origination, as the Buddha calls it, is to be abandoned. The cessation is to be realized. And you do that by developing the path. So understanding of the Four Noble Truths is something to be developed as part of a larger path of action. You can see that the Buddha analyzes things in ways that go against the current of our ordinary thinking. It's almost as if you go into another world when you're taking on his teachings, because he offers these four truths, as I said, not just as interesting facts, but as a structure, a framework for deciding what to do. If you know anything about the Buddha's teachings on becoming, you realize he's putting you into a certain state of becoming. Becoming is an identity that you take in a world of experience, centered on a particular desire. The desire here, of course, is to put an end to suffering. And these becomings the Buddha talks about can happen in the mind. The world outside that we know is also a state of becoming. We're in it because of becomings in the mind. We take on many different becomings in the mind in the course of the day. You focus on wanting something, and then you take on an identity within the world where that thing is located. The world has its customs, its laws about what works and what doesn't work. It also has a sense of what's relevant and what's not relevant to the desire on which it's based. And it's the same way with the state of becoming that the Buddha is having you take on, as you take the Four Noble Truths as your framework. This is why the Buddha says that, in the context of this world, some questions should be answered because they're relevant to the end of suffering, and others should be put aside because they're not. This world, like other worlds, is also based on the act of clinging. There are four types of clinging that he identifies as leading to becomings in general. One is clinging to sensuality. Another is clinging to habits and practices. Another is clinging to views. And another is clinging to a sense of yourself. As we take on the path, we actually use these last three kinds of clinging that create this world of the Four Noble Truths. The one kind of clinging the Buddha doesn't recommend here, of course, is clinging to sensuality. But to make up for the fact that we ordinarily look for our pleasure in sensual fantasies, the Buddha says there's a better place to look for pleasure. He offers the practice of right mindfulness and right concentration as a way of feeding the mind's need for pleasure. It's your nourishment on the path. In this world of the Four Noble Truths, your views, of course, are shaped by the Four Noble Truths themselves. And the duties they give go into our clinging to habits and practices. These are the practices we should do. We should try to comprehend suffering. We should try to abandon its cause. This, again, goes against a lot of thinking in the world. We usually think that we want to get rid of suffering and just start pushing it away. As for the cause of suffering, the different kinds of craving, desire, and passion, those are things we like. We actually cultivate them. But here the Buddha's saying, in this world, the world of the Four Noble Truths, that's going to lead you to the end of suffering. You have to see craving, not as your friend, but as your enemy. Instead of palling around with your cravings, you have to start looking at them askance to see that they are really the problem. As for your sense of self along the path, it mainly comes down to feeling that you're competent to do this practice that will get you to the end of suffering, you as the agent and you as the experiencer. Then, there's the you in there that can keep this framework in mind and look at your actions to see where they measure up and where they don't measure up. Those are the roles that you play in this world of the Four Noble Truths. But as I said, it's so easy to forget this particular world and start going back to your old world, which has its other ideas, other shoulds and views and ways of finding pleasure. Ajahn Fuang tells the story of when he suffered from chronic headaches. He tried Western medicine, he tried Chinese medicine, he tried Thai medicine, and nothing was working. It got so that sometimes he couldn't even sleep at night. The pain was so bad he actually had to have a couple monks or novices staying in the room with him in case he woke up in the middle of the night and needed hot compresses or whatever. But then, there was one night when he happened to wake up in the middle of the night, sat up, and the monks who were supposed to be looking after him were asleep. The first thought that went through his mind was, who's looking after whom here? Then he said to himself, well, that's their business. I've got my business I've got to take care of. And suddenly he realized he'd been trying to get rid of the pain, get rid of the suffering of the headache, which is not the duty in the context of the world of the Four Noble Truths. The duty there was to comprehend it. Okay, what was he clinging to? Where were his desires and passions aimed? What was he craving? When he looked at it from that point of view, things opened up in his mind. He didn't make any claims about what happened there, but the way he described it, it sounded like stream entry, when you gain your first glimpse of the deathless. He came out of that experience and realized that simply engaging with the senses is stressful, for he'd found something that had nothing to do with the senses at all and was totally free of stress. That's a case of putting yourself into the world of the Four Noble Truths and realizing, what are my duties within this context? So, when you're suffering from something, ask yourself, am I actually trying to comprehend my suffering, or am I doing something else with it? Am I developing it? Am I trying to abandon it? You can abandon the cause, but the suffering itself has to be comprehended first so that you understand. What are you clinging to? What are you feeding on? Why? What's the allure? And what are the drawbacks? It's in this context of trying to comprehend suffering and abandon its cause that the Buddha teaches those three characteristics or three perceptions. The perceptions of inconstancy, suffering, not self. That's where they fit into this larger framework. All too often you hear it the other way around, that the world is described by these three characteristics. And the Four Noble Truths are true because they admit the truth of the three characteristics. But that's getting things backwards because the three characteristics on their own don't have any duties. You can say the world is inconstant, and you can do all kinds of things with that idea. You can decide that you simply have to accept things and not try to desire anything better or more reliable. Or you can decide to grasp at any pleasure that comes your way before it disappears. The world is stressful. Again, you can decide that you simply have to accept that fact. And from there, many people conclude, well, there is no self. But if there's no self, who's going to do the practice? Who's going to benefit? Who's going to be able to analyze what's going well and what's not? If there's no self, there's nobody doing anything. You hear some people teaching, there's no choice at all. We have no free will at all. The path just happens on its own. which is totally opposed to what the Buddha actually taught. He taught truths that are a call to action. He says, basically, that with these truths, you can know what to do, you're capable of doing it, and they'll take you to something beyond them. Remember, the Four Noble Truths are part of the path. The path goes to the cessation of suffering. It's not the same thing. The factors of the path are means. You're in this world of the Four Noble Truths, which is a kind of becoming, but we're here to put an end to becoming, which means that the Four Noble Truths have to point to their abandoning. And they do. Right view looks at things in terms of how they're put together, and everything that's put together has its drawbacks, so you want to let it go. Then you realize, well, right view itself is put together, so it has similar drawbacks. You don't let it go, though, until the very last step of the path. All the factors of the path, then, are things you have to abandon, because they've delivered you to where you want to go. That's what gives them meaning, which is why I say this is a structure that's built not on first principles, but on final principles, on goals, attainments. We're talking about how the Dhamma has an atta, which is a Pali word that means meaning, goal, benefit. This world of the Four Noble Truths delivers you to that atta, that benefit, that goal. They find their meaning in taking you there. So try to look at your actions in the context of that view, that world, because then you know what to do. Of course, you can decide to take on other worlds. The Buddha's not forcing this on you, but he is saying this is an opportunity. You can put an end to suffering, a total end to suffering. It would be good to take him up on that offer. Clinging and craving on the path. As you commit to the path and reflect on your actions, you begin to appreciate the Buddha's strategy for attacking the problem of suffering. Before you abandon the cause of suffering, he has you develop something better to hold on to in the interim, both to make you more inclined to let go of your cravings and to ensure, when you do let go, that you won't be set adrift. In fact, his step-by-step discourse marked the beginning stage in providing you with that something better. As you'll recall, he gave that talk to wean his listeners away from their infatuation with sensuality. To do that, he provided them with a way of viewing the world in which a certain course of action, the renunciation of sensuality, is an obvious and attractive should, because it leads to your long-term welfare and happiness, with you defined in terms of multiple lifetimes. In other words, as you recall the four types of clinging that constitute the first noble truth, you'll see that he's recommending a view clinging and doctrine of self-clinging that will help get you started on the habits and practices of the path. This means that as you get started on the path, the Buddha proposes 3 new versions of clinging to replace the unskillful ways of clinging in which you've engaged in the past. As for sensuality clinging, that has no role on the path at all, but the path itself proposes an interim pleasure, the pleasure, rapture, and equanimity of right concentration that will form an alternative object of desire to replace your desires for sensuality. This non-sensual pleasure will be your food along the way, so that you're not tempted to revert to sensuality as the path gets difficult. In effect, with the practice of right concentration, the Buddha's offering a skillful type of habit and practice clinging to replace sensuality clinging as your source of inner food. In fact, of all 3 forms of clinging to be used in the path, habit and practice clinging is the most pivotal. After all, the path to the end of clinging is a path of action. We've noted that it's the karma that puts an end to karma, which is why the Buddha's teachings go into great detail on the habits and practices of virtue, concentration, and discernment that should be developed to form the path. However, to believe that such a path could actually work, you need a view about the world in which actions can be freely chosen and have the power to transcend the round of death and rebirth. This is why right views about action, karma, and rebirth also form part of the path. At the same time, you need to have a sense that you, as an agent, are capable of following the path and that you, as a consumer, will benefit from doing so. This is why, as part of his strategy for motivating you to engage in the path factor of right effort, the Buddha provided many teachings to encourage a healthy sense of self, saying that the self is its own mainstay, that it's responsible for its actions, that it's capable of mastering the path, and that it will benefit from doing so. But it's worth noting that even though the early teachings are very detailed in their instructions as to what should and shouldn't be done, the worldviews and self-views they provide to support these instructions are nothing more than sketches. Because they're not the focus, the Buddha addressed views of the world and the self only when absolutely necessary to support the basic premises of Dhamma. The truths of action and rebirth, for instance, were hotly debated by his contemporaries, so he had to take a position on those issues to justify the path of practice he taught. The size and age of the cosmos were also hot topics, but because they had no bearing on the power of action, the Buddha consistently put those topics aside. Similarly with issues of the self, other philosophical schools debated the question of how best to define the self, but, as we've seen, the Buddha noted that to define yourself was to limit yourself. So he refused to answer questions about what the self was, or even whether it existed. As he said, questions of that sort weren't worthy of attention. All he was concerned about was your perception of self, responsible for your actions, competent to follow the path, and able to benefit from doing so, and the reality of control. You can manipulate the aggregates at least enough to construct a path that can take you to awakening. The raft may be made of twigs and branches, but if you tie them together well enough, they can do the job. In fact, the question of action was so central to the path that one of its crucial steps was to learn how to see that your sense of the world and yourself were nothing more than actions themselves. They come about from things you do, and the act of holding to them is a kind of karma that, like all actions, carries consequences. As you follow the Buddha's instructions to provide yourself with skillful clingings to fall back on, you develop the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. And as you develop those factors, you come to appreciate how well they target the three kinds of craving that cause suffering: craving for sensuality, craving for becoming, and craving for non-becoming. In other words, you see for yourself how the fourth noble truth helps put an end to suffering by attacking it right at the cause. The factors most directly involved in this approach are the ones that comprise the discernment group, right view and right resolve, and the concentration group, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. The remaining factors in the virtue group play more of a supporting role in that they develop the clear conscience and mental sensitivity that right mindfulness and right concentration need in order to be honest and strong. The factors of the concentration group, in turn, provide an important foundation for making the discernment group sharper and more effective. They do this in three ways. One of the main reasons why people crave sensuality is because they can imagine no other alternative to pain. As the Buddha said, even when you can see the drawbacks of sensuality, if you have no access to a higher form of pleasure, you'll stay stuck in sensual craving. So one of the prime functions of right concentration is to provide that skillful alternative. Second, the fact that right concentration is composed of the 5 aggregates means that, as you work to develop it, you get hands-on experience in what the aggregates actually are and how they function. Because you play with them to create a state of concentration, they're now your playmates. You're on familiar terms with them as activities in which you engage, and this takes them from the realms of abstraction into the realm of direct, active experience. Finally, the fact that right mindfulness and right concentration increase the steadiness of the mind means that right view can see the subtle motions of the mind, along with their interactions, much more clearly in real time. To go beyond craving for becoming and craving for non-becoming, you have to see the events of the mind that ordinarily lead up to becoming and develop dispassion for them as events before they have a chance to develop into a sense of self or world. The fact that right view looks at experience in terms of skillful and unskillful actions, and right resolve aims at avoiding unskillful mental attitudes, means that these discernment factors are equipped with the right framework to make this analysis. When supported by the factors of the concentration group, they can apply this framework to actual events. The canon says that craving for sensuality is the first form of craving to be overcome, followed by craving for becoming and non-becoming. This gives the impression that you focus exclusively first on sensuality and then on the other two forms of craving, but in actual practice, you need to attack all three at once. That's because sensuality, fantasies and plans for sensual pleasures, entails a sense of the self who will find and enjoy the pleasures, along with the world in which those pleasures will be found. This means that the grosser forms of becoming that surround sensuality will be the first to go, followed by the subtler ones that surround the practice of the path itself. To detect the events leading up to craving, and through craving and clinging to becoming, and then to develop dispassion for them, the Buddha recommends a 5-step program, SN 2257. 1. See their origination, i.e., what other events cause them. 2. Observe their passing away as those causes pass away. These 2 steps allow you to discern the fabricated nature of these events as steps in a process. 3. Look for their allure, why the mind is attracted to them. 4. Look for the drawbacks of clinging to them. When you see that the drawbacks far outweigh the allure, 5. Dispassion arises, providing the escape from them. The crucial steps in this approach are 3 and 4. As we noted in Chapter 6, one of the difficult aspects of truly understanding craving is to see precisely where it's located. That's the duty here of Step 3. If you don't detect the exact location of the allure, then no matter how much insight you have into the drawbacks, that insight won't lead to true dispassion because it won't be on target. As for Step 4, the Buddha prescribes many perceptions to apply to these fabricated events to help you see that they're not worth the effort of fabricating states of becoming around them. These perceptions fall into 3 main groups: focusing on the inconstancy of fabrications, focusing on the stress of whatever is inconstant, and focusing on the fact that if something is inconstant and stressful, it's not self. These perceptions are aimed at helping you to see that any state of becoming that you construct out of such raw materials won't lie totally under your control and so inevitably will lead to disappointment. The effort required to construct a sense of self around such things is simply not worth it. It would be like building a house out of flimsy materials in an area prone to earthquakes. It could fall down at any time. When this value judgment hits home, that's how right view develops the dispassion that can put an end to that particular instance of craving for sensuality. In the beginning stages of the practice, as you're developing discernment aimed at dispassion, there's a natural tendency to hold on to the insights that work. After all, this is how discernment develops. You use your powers of alertness to see what gives good results in getting past a particular craving, and you use your powers of mindfulness to remember that lesson for future use. Your command of the path encourages you to hold on to it with more and more confidence. However, over time, as you get more skilled in reflecting on what you're doing as you develop this discernment, you begin to see that you're simply replacing gross forms of craving with subtler ones. The craving that leads you to cling to the factors of the path. After all, given that the factors of the path can be objects of clinging, and clinging is based on craving, those factors arise in dependence on the same sorts of mental events that underlie the cravings you've been abandoning. If you really want to be free from the stress of fabrications, you'll have to start letting go of the craving to hold on to the path, without, of course, reverting to craving in its more blatantly unskillful forms. This sort of reflective insight, backed up by heightened powers of concentration and discernment, is what enables you to begin developing the dispassion that leads to the noble attainments. Your act of letting go becomes more all-encompassing. You begin to let go, not only of the cravings you've been observing, but also of the factors of the path that underlie the act of observing. In fact, this is the stage of the practice where the separate duties of the Four Noble Truths begin to converge. Dispassion, which is the duty with regard to the second noble truth, now becomes the duty for all four. Comprehending suffering leads to having dispassion for clinging. Developing the path, and especially the factor of right view, leads to having dispassion for the factors of the path. Even when realizing cessation, you have to have dispassion for it if you want your freedom to be all around. The main turning point is when you start developing dispassion for the path. The canon describes a variety of ways in which this can happen. This means that the exact insight that will lead to a breakthrough to the noble attainments will vary from person to person. In the most general terms, the canon says that you take the same 5-step program that you applied to acts of craving and clinging, and you apply it to the 5 faculties of conviction, persistence, mindfulness, concentration, and discernment. Because the faculty of conviction includes the virtue group of the Noble Eightfold Path, and the faculty of persistence is the same thing as right effort, this means that, in effect, you apply this framework to all the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, SN 48-3-4. You see how the path originates from causes and how it passes away. You see its allure in freeing you from stress and suffering and in providing you with the peace and pleasures of jhana. But you also see its drawbacks in that it's fabricated and so has to be constantly maintained. In some cases, the canon says that you focus this analysis on the practice of concentration, seeing how it's composed of the 5 aggregates and applying the same perceptions of inconstancy, stress, and not self to those aggregates until the mind inclines toward the deathless. AN 936. In other cases, it says that you apply the insights of right view to right view itself. Just as right view has taught you to regard views as actions and to see the stress that comes from clinging to those views, it now teaches you to look for the stress in clinging to right view. When you see this stress clearly as a drawback, that insight inclines the mind in the direction of the deathless, DN 1, AN 1092. In either case, you realize that you can't stay where you are, nor can you go to any other mental location, for that would involve craving and stress as well. If, while the mind is faced with this dilemma, an opening occurs that is neither here nor there, that's the opening to the deathless, Ood 110. The canon illustrates this point with a paradox. A heavenly being once asked the Buddha how he crossed over the flood, and he replied that he neither pushed forward nor stayed in place. That was how he was freed from locations and everywhere released. SN 11. Now, the canon warns that, on gaining an experience of the deathless, it is possible to feel passion and delight for it, and so to cling to it. And 936. When that happens, your awakening is only partial, as the mind still has a location, the perception of the deathless to which it clings. This is because your powers of reflection are still not strong enough. You didn't catch these new acts of craving and clinging in time. And while even a partial experience of the deathless is life-changing, it confirms your conviction in what the Buddha taught, that the ending of suffering is possible. It also teaches you that there's more work to be done. You'll have to pick up the path again in order to strengthen your powers of concentration and discernment so that the next time the opening to the deathless occurs, you'll be better prepared. It's because the experience of the deathless is so overwhelming that the canon forewarns you. You need to apply the perception of not-self not only to fabricated phenomena, but also to the deathless itself. And as we've noted, you'll then have to let go of that perception too, so that your release will be complete. All of which goes to show the importance of the basic training in truthfulness that the Buddha recommended for his followers from the very beginning. As you learn to be more honest and observant toward your actions, to be accurate in the perceptions you apply to your experiences, and to be truthful in reporting your actions and in citing the source of your views, you begin to develop the reflective skills that will carry you all the way to the reality of suffering's end.